Jonathan, I think potentially a topic for a future conversation would be the desire to include industries or groups beyond mathematics as the tech community has the potential to grow.
Which communities do you have in mind?
First off, I think about the number of university students who are not necessarily mathematics focused, but want to write their dissertation in tech. And secondly, I think of any person that wants to have reproducible results, no matter what those results pertain to, whether it's a government document, a science paper, or a law document. They want to be able to allow other people to produce that same document in the same way that they did on their own machine. I think that that is an entirely different community than, say, a mathematics professor. And if the law tech community is willing to open themselves up to providing guidance to these people, or if the impetus is really on them to get themselves up to speed with computer science enough that they can understand the errors when they run into them, because it's pretty inevitable that that's going to happen.
I mean, certainly within physics, practically everything is written in LaTeX, I would say. For most journals, books, someone from Cambridge University Press was telling me that most of their books are written in physics, in LaTeX. Not necessarily that Cambridge University Press uses LaTeX internally, but what the author gives them has been done with LaTeX. And I would say probably well over 95% of journals in physics, the standard is to do stuff in LaTeX. I don't know. It's certainly less so in chemistry, probably even less so in biology, but I don't know how the breakdown is. But it's certainly not exclusive to mathematics. And I would be surprised if mathematicians are the largest group who uses LaTeX. It might be physicists, I don't know.
Or more likely computer scientists, because there's a huge number of those,
yeah.
Electrical engineers and so on. I agree with you there. My colleagues in biology and chemistry largely live in a word processor world for their submissions. And
Yeah.
I talked to, we happen to have the editor-in-chief of the Journal of the American Chemical Society here in this campus, and my wife worked for him for 25 years. And I talked to one of the production staff at the American Chemical Society, and he told me they get a small percentage of submissions in LaTeX. Almost everything else is word processor produced. These days, predominantly Microsoft Word, but in the past, others as well. But what they do is take them and turn them into SGML behind the scenes. And so they don't really care what authors send them because it's going into something different. And as happens with most of the commercial publishers, the job of turning author submitted copy into the in-house representation of the text is done by firms in Eastern Europe and India at lower costs than could be done in Europe and the United States and Canada. And many of them simply want a PDF file and a heavily marked up XML file, or in the case of ACS, an SGML file. And once they've got that, they don't care what the author submitted. But of course, as you noted in past conversations in this meeting, that you can run into a lot of trouble from the translation behind the scenes of your format to their format, and the misunderstanding of the material. We've had theses corrected to read thermodynamics are a subject because it had an S in the first word. Yeah, it's an ongoing problem, and it just takes a lot of author care. The book that I co-published with Arnold Robbins several years ago on shell scripting, we did it in XML at the request of the publisher, but it turned out once they got an XML, the first thing they did was import it into a GUI-based document formatting system that could handle input XML, and they proceeded to bollocks it up rather thoroughly. And it took a lot of work to get those errors out.
Yeah. I mean, I think
I'm going to go back to what Kelly said, which is enlarging the tech community. When tech started, it was a typesetting program. It still is, of course. And journal and book publishing required typesetting. So the obvious place to grow is to use tech for journal publication, which is what the American Mathematical Society did, and to produce books using tech and so forth. Now, there are things that are not books, such as technical reports, invoices, and other examples which require a certain amount of standardization and uniformity. If you look at a printed till receipt, you'll find it's a structured document with a large amount of uniformity in its structure. My milkman produces a bill every so often that is would have been produced by TeX. It's a structured document. So what's going on here is that there are lots of areas where computers are used to produce documents, apart from the traditional books and journal articles, which are the sort of traditional academic printing things. So we had somebody in a tech hour recently that said that they had their own system at the Technical University of Vienna, TUV, to deal with course syllabuses. And the system was built in TeX, and the authoring was done in TeX, but it was all in a sort of disciplined way, and you were producing a legal document, if you like. Now, reproducibility is quite important if you have collaborators. And that's one of the weaknesses, I think, of perhaps of Word. Sorry, I'm going to go off on a different topic, which is that Python is rising to the top 3 of the TOB index of popular programming languages. And in large part, that's been driven by data science. So data science is an area where you need to produce technical reports with language. And perhaps TeX as a report generating, a system for typesetting reports is something where there's real potential. So you take a report and you sort of analyze what's needed to be required and produce a system that doesn't require anybody to install any software on the machine, because it's all being done in the cloud using a GitHub action or whatever. I think that's an area where tech might have a growth potential, but that would require everything to work much, much simpler, much more easily. And it might not even require tech as the input language, it's just tech as the typesetting language. The other thing, which I should have said earlier, is that Pandoc is a really important ingredient in terms of all of this, I think. That Pandoc will say you can author in Markdown, and Pandoc will convert it into LaTeX, and it will also convert it into Word if you need Word, and it will do other conversions. So if we have Markdown input and TeX as one of the outputs, then we're back into Kelly's situation, actually, which is she uses R Markdown, she uses R Studio, and the back end is LaTeX. And one hopes that there are no tech errors arising, except when you make a mistake in the mathematics. And the mistakes in the mathematics, in the mathematical markup, should be easy to report and confine and so forth. So I think there are sort of possibilities.